Hey guys, Sam back here with Planes on the Prairie, and today we have a special treat for you. Behind me we have a Chance Vought F4U for Corsair, which is part of the Wings of the North collection in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. And we're going to talk a little bit about the general history of the Corsair, just because we don't really have this type of opportunity to film Corsairs like we do other aircraft. We're going to talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to get into the specific history of this particular F4U4. So we'll start out up at the front and we'll talk a little bit about the design. In 1938, the U.S. Navy Bureau of Aeronautics put out a request to get a very fast single-engine fighter. They wanted something that had maximum speed and could pack a punch, because a lot of fighters of those days were biplanes or very slow monoplanes with 2 seats, low armament, or small amounts of armament. So what Vought came up with was something resembling a Corsair. So what they did was they fitted a XR 2800, the prototype version of this R2800, which was rated just a little bit over 1800 horsepower, one of the largest engines produced at the time, and it's called a double Wasp. So there's 2 rows of cylinders there, so 18 total cylinders. And that engine turned out to be a huge success, being in production model Corsairs, P-47s, and other really larger-than-life fighters of World War II. And to get the maximum potential out of the R2800s, they decided to fit the largest propeller they could get, which was a 3-blade, not a 4-blade, Hamilton standard propeller, which had a diameter of just a little bit over 13 feet, which was massive. And they ran into a problem with conventional wings. So if you had a conventional wing like a Mustang, or just any flat low dihedral wing, you wouldn't have clearance for the propeller on the ground. As you can see, there's not too much clearance there already with this what's called the inverted gull wing. So the Corsair is nicknamed the bent wing bird, and it gets that from its negative dihedral portion of the wing of the root that turns down into kind of a dip in the wing. With the wings folded up, you can't see the full potential, but you have that negative dihedral right at the root, and that actually was a drag reducing tendency. But so a lot of people talk about how that was a big thing in its design, but it was actually quite offset by the weight of the whole construction of the inverted gull wing. It required more structural reinforcement, and it was very hard to make compared to a standard wing. But with the inverted gull wing, you can see the landing gear is actually kind of short. They were expecting to have to make really tall landing gear for this, but they were able to minimize the length of the landing gear to where the pilot could have a little bit better ground clearance, or ground vision for taxiing. But as you can see with the Corsair, it's still not great ground visibility. But so there's a few things there, just some interesting things about the design. The prototype Corsair flew in 1940, and it was the first U.S. Fighter aircraft to top out over 400 miles an hour, and actually had an average speed of about 405 miles an hour. So that's something that was pretty interesting when I found during the research. And now we're just going to go around to another part of the aircraft and talk about the Corsair's combat history and service history. So the Corsair had a very long service history with many countries all over the world that went way past World War II in Korea. The Corsair started out in U.S. Navy service with the F4U1, which differs a little bit with this one from this one. You still had the R2800, but you had a 3-blade propeller and what's called a birdcage canopy, which came up from the side instead of slid back. And this variant wasn't very widely used. It was introduced in late 1942 to combat, and saw action in places like Guadalcanal in Southeast Asia. And then they didn't have a very long service life, like I said, compared to other ones such as the F4U1A and D variants, which introduced this sliding canopy along with some other small details. But that was the biggest giveaway. It was the sliding canopy as opposed to the birdcage. And those are some of the more common Corsairs you see around, or World War II Corsairs. And they served with both Marine squadrons, U.S. Navy squadrons, and saw some service with the Fleet Air Arm as well during World War II. And later on, we went to the F4U4, which is this variant here, and that one was produced at the beginning or at the end of World War II, and saw action all the way up through Korean conflicts. And we have the F4U 5 and 7, which don't look too much different than these. They had different armaments on them. The cowling's a little bit different on them, but this Corsair, we'll get into its specifics, but the Corsair in general saw a very long service life, very long production run. At the time, it was the longest production run of any aircraft when it was finished being produced during the Korean War. And it had a very successful combat history. Not the most maneuverable aircraft. More of its tactic was to kind of use its speed and get out of there if it ended up being in a defensive position, because it outclassed some of the earlier Zero variants by almost 100 miles an hour, and some of the later ones by over 50. So it was able to get out of there pretty quickly and effectively. So this Corsair was built in 1946 at the Vought plant in Stratford, Connecticut, and went immediately into storage. So this Corsair saw time at a couple different storage facilities at various naval air stations throughout the country, and then served with a couple of Marine squadrons during the late 40s. And then in 1950, it went to Naval Squadron VF-42, in which it's marked up as currently. And then it saw time as a trainer at a couple different naval air stations, one in Olathe, Kansas, and another one in Grosse Isle, Michigan, through the mid-50s. And then it was struck off charge and sold to a civilian owner, who then got it approved for export and then traded it to the Honduran Air Force, so that's Central America, for 4 P-38Ls and 4 P-63s, 2 of which were flyable. All the P-38s were flyable as well. So he got kind of a deal. This thing is worth 8 airplanes. And fun fact is that one of the P-38s and one of the P-63s are currently at the U.S. Air Force Museum on display. So this one, again, went to Honduras during the late 60s and was in the Honduran registry during the soccer war, the infamous soccer war, where Honduras and El Salvador fought in Corsairs and Mustangs, World War II aircraft. And it was a quickly resolved conflict. But this one served as a parts donor during that time and was eventually struck off charge for them, sold stateside, and then a man named Jerry Beck out of Wahpeton, North Dakota, just about 45 minutes to an hour south of Fargo, bought it. And in 1982, he started restoring it, and it was a 6-year project completed in 1988. And it's been in flying condition ever since. Unfortunately, he passed in 2007, but the plane lives on, and it's spent a lot of time here at the Air Museum throughout the Air Museum's 20-year history, and recently went to Wings of the North a few years back down in Eden Prairie. And it comes back once in a while, so that's really nice to see. I grew up admiring it all the time, so it's a fun airplane to just kind of have in the museum right now next to the Mustang behind it. And if you're interested in seeing this, again, Wings of the North, a great collection down there of some World War II aircraft. They have a P-51, T-6, Avenger, and a Stearman, I believe, as well. And something definitely worth checking out. And if you're in Fargo area in the next few days, it's still around, so if you want to come see it at the museum, definitely something to do. And we really appreciate you guys watching and tuning into all this content. We're shifting gears a little bit to World War II and civilian stuff to broaden our scope. We got some flying stuff coming up, some fly-ins coming up in May. We'll be doing some flying videos with me, and we'll be doing a lot of different diverse stuff coming up. So if you are an airplane owner or a pilot and wants to be interviewed, just feel free to shoot us an email. We'll put the link for the email down in the description. And also feel free to message us on our Facebook or Instagram. And if you are interested at all, we also have stickers. Planes on the Prairie stickers, great for water bottles, great for sticking on your vehicle. I have mine on my vehicle and water bottle. So just a nice way to rep. And all the proceeds for these go towards bettering our camera equipment, funding travel to some of these fly-ins and things like that. So they go right back into putting more content out for you guys. So we really appreciate that. And we'll have some B-roll footage here for you on this Corsair, and thanks for watching.